Well, as Ed Sullivan used to say, we're a little late, folks, so good night. How many of you are, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the game of Mahjong. It's a Chinese game played with tiles, and my mother used to play it more or less every week, and maybe more often during the summer. And she played it with other mothers, other Jewish mothers, and they more or less got together for the camaraderie and the fun and to just get together. And that's the way I always thought of Mahjong. That's how it was played. That's what it was about. And then when I went to graduate school at that Massachusetts Home for the Hopelessly Technological, that institute, there were a lot of Chinese students there, and I learned that Mahjong is very different to them. First of all, never saw any women playing it. It was always a bunch of guys who would play it the way that American men might play poker. You know, they got together for the fun and for the camaraderie, but also there was a bit more competition there. And so I learned that even with a simple thing like a game, there could be different attitudes in different cultures. So when I was there in that dorm, I saw people from many different places. My roommate the first year was from Nigeria. There were people from Uganda, from India, people from places I only really knew from maps or heard about. People from places like Canada or Ohio, Pennsylvania, strange exotic places like that. But there was one fella in the dorm, at least one from New York, a fellow named John. He was Italian and Catholic, and I asked him about the idea of the Trinity. What was his understanding of it? And he said, it's like the Three Musketeers. And I thought, like, one for all and all for one? Or he said, no, Three Musketeers, one candy bar. And that's kind of the way I've thought of it ever since, the way John explained it to me. Now, as Reverend Bonnie said, our theme for this month is embracing diversity and oneness. And a lot of the speakers previously have said many similar things about that. I'm going to be reading some quotes here. To become more open to people who are different from us. To find out what somebody else thinks about something and what their opinions are. To let go of prejudices, bigotry, and intolerance. Again, to become more open to people who are different from us, but different how? And the thrust of the message was more or less the same, people who don't look like us. And I thought, well, what about people who do look like us, but don't think like us? What about embracing being open to them too? As I say, the theme is called Embracing Diversity and Oneness, and I'd like to use the word variety instead of diversity, and for a couple of reasons. First of all, somewhere in the 1990s or so, diversity became a political word and a legal one, and many institutions of higher learning, many colleges and universities, many big companies started to put in diversity programs with the idea of being open to more people and better exchange of ideas among people of different backgrounds. And that's the way it started. But a lot of these diversity programs over time started to embrace more of a dogmatic approach. And of course, dogmas are things that you can't question. It's like they were looking at the idea of people who look different from us, and they were going for diversity of bodies, but enforcing a uniformity of opinions. I'm going to just go through quickly a couple of examples. One was this college. I've been listening to some podcasts, and this is where I got these ideas. One was this college where there was this, in the name of diversity, in the name of equity, an event that was clearly racist in how it was worked out. And there was one professor who objected to it. And because he objected to this thing that was in the name of equity and diversity, he was himself called a racist. Now, he was someone who was a long history of being liberal and progressive. And he was vilified. He was told he was a racist. He was told that he couldn't defend himself against the charge of being a racist, which was amazing. Death threats against him, and eventually he had to leave the college with a large settlement, but still. And I think most of you have maybe heard in the news last year about this so-called Google anti-diversity memo. And if you have or if you haven't, I listened to the guy who wrote the memo, who, very nice guy, very soft-spoken, and I read the memo. And it's not anti-diversity at all. He was called a misogynist, a racist, a Nazi, alt-right, all these things. And again, he was shamed and eventually fired for what they said was promoting harmful stereotypes. And he wasn't promoting any harmful thing at all. He was promoting the idea that, that evidence based on good research should trump dogma. But that was not allowed in this era of uniformity. See, in institutes like these, diversity, the idea of diversity has been weaponized. It's become a cudgel to beat people into submission and to uniformity. And that, of course, is not the original idea at all. The original idea was quite the opposite, but that's what it has become in these places. Not everywhere, of course, but that's more or less where the trend is going in these larger institutions. Now, one of the dogmas is that if the percentage of people of certain backgrounds does not match the percentage in the general population within your company or your college, there must be some prejudice, there must be some discrimination going on, even if it's unconscious, which is great because you can't deny the fact that you're doing something unconsciously. So that's the dogma there. The idea is you have to have, for instance, for half of all your students at the college should be women, half of all your faculty should be women, and in the various positions, half of all the employees in your company, and so on. And the idea that maybe there is a disparity in percentages just because of some other cause is, again, verboten. That's sexist, that's racist, and all those things. So I looked at the last 100 speakers we've had here at the center, and only 31 of them have been men, so only 31% are men. This month, 1 in 5. Next month, they're all women, so clearly there's some unconscious prejudice. There's some kind of discrimination going on here, and I think that the leadership here has to undergo some sort of mandatory training. Yeah, to be more open to men being up here. Now, of course, I'm joking. But that sort of thing actually is in some of these programs at these institutions. Some of them actually are discriminatory in a sexist or a racist way. And some people think that's okay. We're correcting injustices from the past, and that's how you got to do it. But it's more or less when people complain about it, they say, well, it's your turn in the barrel. That's all. I don't think that's right. I think you don't end bigotry, prejudice, or intolerance just by shifting its target. I think that sexism is sexism, and racism is racism, and injustice is injustice no matter who the target is. It's your turn in the barrel is never a valid argument. Or as my mother taught me many years ago, 2 wrongs don't make a right. But many of the arguments in favor of these programs are exactly that, 2 wrongs make a right. I don't think so. So that's one of the reasons I prefer to use the word variety instead of Diversity, thank you. Because of all the cooties that have been attached to this word. But even if in its original intent, even if it's in its decodified version, I just think it's too narrow, too small for the concept of unity and oneness in religious science, that infinite variation that Ernest Holmes talked about in the reading. And so I prefer to use the word variety and variation in unity and in oneness. So I'm going to talk a bit about the religious science concept of unity and the variation within it. Instead of all for one and one for all is one, and the one is all. When Reverend Bonnie was up here, she talked about how she said that when you see a stranger walking down the street, you can have at least two different reactions. You could react in fear or you can react in love. I'm going to offer another one. Let's say you have your glasses off and you see a stranger walking down the street, and then at a certain point you say, oh, that's Bob from work, or that's my cousin Jill, or that's my spouse. Without my glasses, Kathy has to get real close before she turns into Kathy. What do we say about that revelation? We say we recognize the person. It's a moment of recognition. And I would offer that perhaps we can transition to the religious science notion of recognition. To recognize not just that that's somebody you know from work or somebody you know, but that to recognize that that person is the thing itself, is God's spirit, the ultimate, the infinite, whatever you want to call it, that's what and who that person is. That goes beyond this idea of, well, let's just be open to other people. That other person is you also walking around in another skin, right? That's what we teach. But I've seen some of you guys' Facebook posts, and let's say there's a dichotomy there. Some of the posts are all about this unity and be the light and love and all that. And then some of the posts are being really pissed off about someone in the news or something that's going on in the news, and just being, in that dualistic world again. And it's really hard to do both. I think of it as kind of the opposite of the problem that Arjuna has in the Bhagavad Gita. At the beginning of the Gita, Arjuna is this warrior, and he's about to go into battle. But he's about to go into battle with his cousins, with his uncles, and he's very hesitant. How can I go fight and kill the mishpucha, old Sanskrit word, and he's just hesitant about it. And the rest of the Gita is about Krishna convincing him to go ahead anyway. But I think we have the opposite problem here. We see people, individuals, who say or do things that we take umbrage at, perhaps, legitimately, doesn't matter. But we forget the unity with them. So how do we remember that? Well, I'd like to offer a meditation. Of the last two presidents, President Trump and President Obama, I would bet good money that nobody here voted for both of them. That there's one you voted for, or the way people vote nowadays, one you voted against and the other one you didn't. So I would like you all to close your eyes and think about the one you didn't vote for, the one you voted against, and to remember your oneness, your unity with that one. Your oneness with Donald Trump, your oneness with Barack Obama. And I know it ain't easy. I know that. But I'd like to offer that as the meditation. Only for a moment or two here. I and Donald Trump are one. I and Barack Obama are one. that president, whichever one, is the thing itself, is the one and only. And I am that one and only. And I'd like to offer you guys to do that meditation for yourselves at home. You can open your eyes now. And I have another one that I won't ask you to go through now. And that is to meditate on the realization that Donald Trump and Barack Obama are one, are both the thing itself, are both that one and only. And you can do that with other public figures too. Again, ones that when you see them or hear about them, you tense up and you don't like what they say or do. Remember your oneness with that person and their oneness with someone you do like. And I think if you would do that every day until the election and past, the election, no matter what the results were, would go easier for you. So I offer that to you as not just a thing for the election, but in general, to get back to that oneness in the face of what goes on in the world. Now, when Reverend Pat was here, she said we're all connected by our humanity. And we are, but it's more than that. As I say, it's our oneness. It's not just our connection, that's our identity with each other. But not just with other people. That's again why I think diversity is too small a word for, and a concept for the religious science notion of unity. When Lillian was here, she asked us to imagine ourselves in constant awe of the beauty in our lives. Imagine that. Imagine yourself in constant awe of the beauty in your life. But I would go further than that. Imagine yourself in a continual state of recognition that everything that shows up is that one and only, that thing itself, God, the Spirit, the universal, the absolute, whatever name you want to call it. And that's that infinite variation in that oneness. That continual state of recognition is, Joel Goldsmith says that that's what is meant by the phrase, to pray without ceasing. So, not just the beautiful things in your life, not just the wonderful piece of art or the beautiful flower, but the pile of garbage in the street, or that island of plastic in the middle of the Pacific that's the thing itself. That's God, that thing of plastic. To remember that. Not just Beethoven's Ode to Joy when you hear that, or the Song of Birds, or a child's laughter, but the jackhammer and the leaf blower. Those two are that one thing. Your favorite food and the food that's gone bad. That one thing. The thing itself. And everything you touch, whether it's rough or smooth, or warm or cold, or wet or dry or sticky, these are just the variations in the texture of divinity. And so it is.